Here's what's cooking on today's Sports Stove podcast. We are starting our NFL draft preview. We're going to look at the first 10 teams drafting in the 2022 NFL draft. We're going to talk NFL news, Major League Baseball news as well, including Cincinnati Reds getting the shaft. That and more. That's what's cooking on today's Sports Stove podcast.
From Belly Up Sports and the Belly Up Podcast Network, you're listening to the Sports Stove podcast with your host, Vince Stover.
Hey, good looking, what you got cooking? How's about cooking something up to me?
Welcome into an all-new edition of the Sports Stove podcast presented by Shocked Energy. Get yourself some low-carb, zero-sugar energy drink. You get it at shockedenergy.com. And, of course, you use the code STOVE. You get 10% off your purchase. Speaking of Stove, we got two of them here tonight, Dad. Welcome back into the program. How you doing?
Doing good. Glad to be back. It's exciting to get into the draft.
Yeah, it's coming up pretty fast, isn't it? I know Belly Up and Dan Mater, he is doing his draft special again this year. I'll be on that Thursday night of round one, the last several picks. And then the first couple picks, first 5 picks, I think, in the second round as well, joining him for that. It's a good time of year for football fans. Of course, the USFL kicking off, Saturday and Sunday. And so football there as well. And but plenty of things going on. And the draft is one of my favorite times of year. And so I figured this year for our draft preview, we're going to start off with the first 10 teams that are drafting. Not the first 10 picks because there's teams that have multiple picks, but the first 10 teams that are drafting. Next episode on Friday, we'll do the next 10 teams, and then we'll get the rest of the NFL teams, whether they're drafting or not in the first round. We'll talk about them on the following Monday's episode. No, I'm sorry. Next Monday we'll do, I don't even know what day it is, Dad. Nonetheless, just stay tuned. We got plenty of draft coverage coming for you.
That's right.
Before the actual NFL draft gets here, we will have a mock draft as well, and give you that this year as well, and possibly give our listeners a chance to win a prize if they get involved with mock drafts with us as well. That will come in future episodes, that announcement. Okay, Dad, let's get right into it because I want to make sure we have plenty of time to talk about everything on the agenda tonight because we got NFL news to talk about. We got Major League Baseball topics to talk about as well, but I want to make sure we get our draft stuff in. So we'll start with that. Pick number 1 is the Jacksonville Jaguars. They got a new coach this year, Doug Peterson. The OC is Press Taylor. The DC is Mike Caldwell. Special teams is Heath Farwell. Key players, Trevor Lawrence, Evan Engram, the tight end, Christian Kirk, the wide receiver, Josh Allen, the edge, Clavon Chiason, the edge as well, and Shaq Griffin, the cornerback. They have needs, Dad, plenty of them. Offensive line, defensive line, safety, middle linebacker are just to name a few. Seems like overall everyone says Aiden Hutchinson's the number 1 player in this draft. Is that something that you think Jacksonville has to go for, or do you think they have to protect Trevor Lawrence with the offensive line?
Well, again, they've made some improvements on the offensive line free agency. They can look at it, either way, really. I mean, it could be, hey, we got Trevor Lawrence. We've got to keep getting help for him, whether it's offensive line or wide receiver, weapons there. But again, you got defensive players. I think, the key is they need to get a player that can't miss. There's several of these teams that aren't doing, well, that are drafting early, that I think that's going to be a key. If they make mistakes, this will hurt because they've got some of them have lots of draft, and Jacksonville does. They got the first pick in the second round, and they've got 2 picks in the third round, so they can help themselves there. I think, yes, taking the number 1 guy, which I guess, everybody says is the edge rusher from Michigan, probably makes sense there. I probably wouldn't be real shocked if Jacksonville traded down. Not very far.
Well, hang on. Let me ask you a question.
They would be a good one to do.
Would you be shocked if someone traded up? Because I think several teams in the top 5 would love to move down. I don't know that there's a player worth moving up for. So that would be my question more so than Jacksonville moving down. Is there anybody that actually wants to come up to number 1 to draft?
I would think they'd be looking at Detroit or Houston.
Okay.
Somebody not moving up far, but they want to get a player. They want to get, maybe they want to get the edge rusher from Michigan. They want to have the first pick. And then Jacksonville could drop down. Probably wouldn't have to give up a lot to do that, especially if it were just 1 or 2 places down, if Jacksonville felt comfortable with taking everything there. If Jacksonville moves down, then I could see them maybe going offensive line or something on the offense. But you can't never lose. You can never lose. We saw that in the last few years with a dominant defensive player, whether it's a defensive back or a rusher. Someone that dominates the game, it'll make a difference for a long time. And Jacksonville being strong on defense, they've made some moves on offense.
Yeah, I just don't feel like there's enough there for people to move up. Houston needs everything. I don't think they're going to give up any picks because they have the cupboard is bare in Houston. They need whatever they can get there. Detroit, I guess, is a possibility. We'll get to them in just a moment. But Jacksonville, I look at them, Dad, they desperately need offensive line help. Cam Robinson is franchise tagged, but he's not your typical left tackle franchise tag kind of player. He's not the kind of guy that every team would have franchise tagged, needless to say. At right tackle, they got Jawan Taylor. He's on the last year of his contract, I believe. They got Brandon Scherf, who they did bring in as a free agent from Washington. That's a good pickup at guard. Tyler Shatley is the center, and Ben Barch is the other guard at the moment. He was a 4th-round pick in 2020. They desperately need it. And you're talking about, again, I go back, I'm going to talk about this a lot throughout the draft process, but teams copy other teams. Cincinnati, they went out and got weapons is what they ended up doing. This year, they have to get offensive line. They've done that through free agency. But last year, they got weapons. The Jaguars, they go out and get Christian Kirk. Can he be a legit number 1 receiver is a question. I tend to think so. I'm not sure if he can do it in this offense, if that makes any sense. They got Marvin Jones from Detroit. They got Zay Jones there as well. He played in Vegas. They got Laviska Shenault, who they drafted a couple years ago. So they've got some weapons there. They go out and get Evan Ingram at tight end. Plus, they got Dan Arnold as well. They've got the quarterback. They've got running backs and James Robinson and Travis Etienne. So it seems like offensive line is the piece they're missing on offense. And when you talk about the number 1 overall pick means that you can have the guy you like the most. But again, if you have Aiden Hutchinson as your number 1 player on the board, and most people have him as undoubtedly the number 1 player on the board, then I feel like you have to go with them, even though you drafted Kieson in 2020. Again, it's a new front office, a new coaching staff. They have plenty of needs on defense as well. So it'll be interesting. We're not doing our mock draft yet. I'm not predicting who they're picking yet. It seems like Aiden Hutchinson is where everything's leaning right now, but you wouldn't be surprised either if one of the tackles, Evan Neal or Ikem Ikwanu, go off the board at number 1 from things that are being said there as well. All right, let's move on to the Detroit Lions here. They're drafting number 2 overall as well as number 32 from the Rams. They've got Dan Campbell as their head coach, Ben Johnson, OC, Aaron Glenn, DC, and Dave Phipp at special teams. Key players, DeAndre Swift at running back, DJ Shark and Amon-Ra St. Brown at wide receiver, TJ Hawkinson, tight end, Michael Brockers at defensive line, and Jeff Okudah, who's been injured, hasn't really been able to produce up to his draft status just yet at cornerback. They have needs at quarterback. We'll talk about that. Defensive line, linebacker, and cornerback as well. When you come to the Lions, the first thing you talk about is quarterback. Jared Goff, is he good enough? According to Dan Campbell, you don't need an elite quarterback to win in this league, says the guy who's never won in this league. But Dan Campbell says that. So is he saying that because they're going to go out and get themselves a quarterback? Or does he truly believe that Jared Goff is good enough to lead this Detroit team to the top of the NFC North?
Well, I think part of it, and I know we may not really agree on this, but when you look at this draft with quarterbacks, I think you have to look, is one of the quarterbacks you're going to draft be better than what you have? And that may not be true with Detroit. Jared Goff may be as good as either one, any of the top 3 or 4 would be this year. Now, again, you'd have somebody maybe for the future that would develop. I think Detroit, again, if they package something with that last pick, I could see them taking a quarterback, but not with the second pick in the draft. I think they can help themselves more probably on the defensive side. Is what I would think would make sense. But again, Detroit and making sense doesn't always go together.
Yes. Can't wait till we get to Chicago. Yeah, that pick 32 makes more sense for a quarterback, obviously. Number 2 is too high for the quarterbacks in this draft. But you might be able to get a guy at 32, a guy like Ritter, Howell, Corral, somebody like that can sit behind Goff, because I think Goff is good enough to help Detroit improve and get them to where they become a quarterback away, basically, if that makes sense. He can be I hate to say it this way, Alex Smith kind of quarterback. He's been to a Super Bowl. I mean, so he's got to have some talent in there. I think as much as I like to make fun of Dan Campbell, I think he's got the players believing in him. They bought into what he's doing there in Detroit. Detroit, like I said, they brought in DJ Shark this year. Amon-Ross St. Brown came out of nowhere. He had a huge season. It was a 4th-round draft pick last year. Of course, his brother played in Green Bay, but nonetheless, he had a great year. So they got him. They bring in Josh Reynolds from Tennessee as well. They could use more receiver help for sure. Offensive line, they drafted Penei Sewell last year. They've got a pretty decent offensive line as it currently sits. TJ Hawkinson's one of the better tight ends in the league. Not a lot of depth there. And then running back, they're pretty well set too. DeAndre Swift, they got Jamal Adams behind him. I was thinking at 32, or they've got pick 34 as well. I was thinking that maybe the Michigan State running back would make sense for them to add to that running back that room, but I'm not sure that they necessarily need that either. Defensively, there's guys that are fine. Nobody that stands out that's great. Like I said, Okudah has yet to perform the way they need him to. Michael Brockers is pretty decent, obviously, as well. And there are other guys that, again, are good, don't stand out as great on this defensive side. Dad, everything that I'm hearing is Detroit wants Kayvon Thibodeau, who at one time was considered the number 1 overall draft pick until they got into the postseason stuff and said he didn't have the motor and all this kind of stuff. So he started getting drawn down the board. Some people saying that, all the way down to maybe even 7 or 8 on the board. But right now, the rumors coming out is that Detroit loves Kayvon Thibodeau. They would take Aiden Hutchinson in a heartbeat if he's there, but they're expecting him to be gone. And they're a team that has been rumored to be trying to get trading down as well. So maybe they're trying to oversell some other players in order to move down a couple picks and still get Thibodeau there just a few picks later, possibly. But even if they stay where they are, it sounds like defense is where they're going. Thibodeau makes the most sense. Of course, there are cornerbacks on the board as well. Sauce Gardner, Trent McDuffie from Washington, and Derek Stingley from LSU. So they're an interesting team, Dad. If I were them, I would not package and move up. I would stay at 32 and 34 and see what comes to me, because I think they can make their team a lot better using those picks versus packaging them to move up and get a guy that could be a good quarterback or might not be any better than, like you said, Jared Goff. As I don't know, there's nobody in this draft that's better than Jared Goff next year. They might be better than Jared Goff in 2 or 3 years, and that's something they'll have to figure out for themselves. All right, let's go to team number 3, Houston Texans. Again, a team that is in desperate need of everything. They don't have one position that's locked down right now in Houston. Lovie Smith is the new head coach in Houston, the only guy willing to take on that sinking ship. Pep Hamilton, the OC. Lovie Smith will act as the DC as well. Frank Ross coaching the special teams. They do have Brandon Cooks, which most people assume he'll get traded. Laramie Tunsil at left tackle. Davis Mills at quarterback. He seems to be the guy in Houston that they plan on rolling out with for next season. Desmond King at cornerback is good as well. Dad, the way it currently looks with Jacksonville and Detroit probably going defense, Houston is a good potential for being our first offensive player, and that being an offensive lineman, but very well could go another direction too. They could go defense as well and get themselves the guy they like, maybe the highest ranked cornerback There's a lot of talk about the Georgia edge rusher as well, and Trayvon Walker. There's receivers up there. There's all kinds of options. And like I said, Houston doesn't have to draft for need because they need everything.
Yes, no, that's definitely true. I think you have to remember Lovie Smith, is a defensive coach in a lot of ways. So very well, I think, could go the defensive route. But like I said, they need everything. And the biggest key is they need to get somebody that's an impact player for many, many years. And but at the third pick, they should, looking at this draft, they should be able to get people that help them there. And of course, they'll have a high pick in the second round and then 2 picks in the third round. So they're good. They'll be able to help themselves some, but like I said, they really have needs.
Yeah, they got 2 picks in the first round. They acquired the Cleveland pick as well. So they picked 13th, 3 and 13. So you can go again with the best player on the board because they have so many needs. They can go with the top ranked offensive lineman here. And then at 13, pick up a skill player, a cornerback, or wide receiver. And again, there's other players out there, linebackers and other things out there as well. So there's a lot of depth in this draft. There's no superstars that we can see, but there is definitely plenty of depth of solid players that should be able to produce for a long time to come. That brings us to actually, I wanted to look at Houston. This team has been gutted for several different reasons, but nonetheless, they are hurting as it currently sits. Like I said, they got Brandon Cooks. Their other receivers are Nico Collins and Chris Moore, Philip Dorsett they brought in. They need help at wide receiver. Offensive line, they got Tunsil. They've got some other guys that are a little older as well, so maybe not great there. Tight end, they don't have anybody great. Quarterback, Davis. What do you think about Davis Mills? Do you think he's legit? Do you think he has a chance to be that? Again, I don't think anybody expects him to be a superstar, but to be a moderate quarterback that can survive the NFL.
I think he'll get the chance. I don't know, if he is. Now again, they're in a division that's going to help them a little bit, maybe there from that standpoint. But I think I think it's fine to roll the dice with him and take a shot. And I think they'll add another quarterback. I don't know if it'd be one of the top 5 or 6, but I wouldn't be surprised if, second, third round, fourth round, they'll add a quarterback to come in and give somebody a shot, if they got somebody scouted to have potential.
Yeah, I agree with you, but honestly, I would be a little surprised if they draft quarterback this year, unless one of them just falls to the right spot, right? I think that they're in the hunt maybe for next year's draft class because they're going to be bad this year no matter what, and there's some great quarterbacks coming out next year, so they might not care to draft a quarterback this year. Let's move on to the Jets. The Jets, another team with 2 first-round picks. They draft 4th and 10th overall as they got the 10th pick from Seattle for Jamal Adams. Robert Saleh makes his second year as head coach. Mike LaFleur, offense coordinator. Jeff Ulbrich, defensive coordinator. Brant Boyer, the special teams coach. Key players, Zach Wilson at quarterback, Elijah Moore at wide receiver, CJ Uzoma comes over from Cincinnati at tight end. Michael Carter, they drafted last year at running back. Carl Lawson coming back from injury. CJ Mosley, linebacker. Quentin Williams at defensive line. And again, Zach Wilson, Elijah Moore, Michael Carter, all drafted last year are important pieces to what they had to do this year. Their needs are wide receiver. They really need a number 1 wide receiver. They need some help on the defensive line or rushing. Linebackers, cornerback is a popular spot here. Most people have them taking either wide receiver or cornerback at 4 and then the other one at 10 as 2 positions they desperately need help in. I know you're a fan of the coaching staff here in New York. How quickly can they turn things around and for the Jets?
Well, this draft can obviously help them. 2 picks in the first round, 2 picks in the second round. So they can get help here. Again, when you look at them, they're drafting early, but when you look at them in Houston, they're in better shape than a team like Houston is, probably maybe better shape than Detroit. I don't know. They have potential if, they think they have their quarterback. And if that turns out to be the case, then, they can build around that. So I think, again, if they could hit on those 4 picks, with players that can contribute and be good players for a long time, I would think at least one of the first two picks in the first round would be offensive line. Because I think one of the really good tackles or really good guards obviously will be there, maybe at either pick. And again, if they have the quarterback coming up, they have some offensive weapons. Having a stellar offensive lineman for the future probably would, if they only had one pick, it'd be different. But having two picks, I'd be surprised if they pass. Especially, and you should have some of the really good, whether it's the tackles or a couple of the good inside guys be there.
They will. They went offensive line with 2 high picks last year. And not to say they can't add more, right? But they got Mekhi Becton. Excuse me, that was in 2020. They in the first round of 2020. They got Elijah Vera Tucker in the first round of 2021. Then they also brought over Connor McGovern from Denver, Laken Tomlinson from San Francisco, and George Fant from Seattle. So they, in my opinion, they like what they have at offensive line. But you're right. I mean, you talk about best player available, it's probably going to be an offensive lineman at that spot. I look at this team, Dad. Their defense is okay. If Carl Lawson can come back from his injury and be what he was in Cincinnati, that'll help a lot. They really like John Franklin at the other end position. And he had a good year last year. They got Rankins and Williams at the defensive tackles. They need a little bit of linebacker help. And again, I think cornerback's a big issue for them. But I look at their wide receivers. They got Braxton Berrios. They got Corey Davis, who I don't like Corey Davis, so was not high on that one coming in last year when they picked him up from Tennessee. Denzel Mims has not really turned out to be what they were hoping he would be either. So I like at number 4, them going wide receiver, getting the best wide receiver on the board, whoever they think that is. There is a lot of wide receiver talent, so they'd be available at 10. Somebody will be, and they'll be available in the second round probably that are decent as well. But if you can get the number 1 player in a position, I think you do it. And I think wide receiver is as such a need as it is, I think is a good place to go. Some people like Drake London from USC. A lot of people like Garrett Wilson from Ohio State. And I think Garrett Wilson will be the first receiver off the board. I'm not sure if he'll go at 4 to the Jets or not. That's yet to be seen as well. But this is a team that they're not that far away. And if they have a good draft this year, then you can see them massively improve. But, of course, Dad, they have to deal with the division that has Buffalo and Miami, who's made some big moves this year. And you got New England, who's not going to go away quietly. So we'll see how all that shakes out as well. Let's move on to number 5 is the New York Football Giants. They also draft number 7. They got that one from Chicago. Brian Daboll, the new head coach. Mike Kafka is the offense coordinator. Don Martindale, defensive coordinator. Thomas McGahee, I'm not sure how you say that, is the special teams coordinator. And, Dad, this is a really good coaching staff. Daboll and Martindale, Kafka's the offense coordinator, but Daboll will be very involved with that coming over from Buffalo. And then Martindale is a phenomenal defensive coordinator, was with Baltimore for several years and became available. So that's interesting. Then you've got key players, Daniel Jones at quarterback, Saquon Barkley at running back, Leonard Williams, DN, Blake Martinez, who I think is vastly underrated at middle linebacker, Aziz Ojulari that was drafted last year, James Bradbury at cornerback. They need offensive line help. They need cornerback help. They need wide receivers. And some think they need a quarterback. I'm kind of on the side of I want to see what Brian Daboll can do with Daniel Jones. But if the right guy, not at 5. And I don't think it's 7 either. I don't think it's the way you draft a quarterback in this draft. So let's start there again with quarterback, Daniel Jones. Are you on the same page as me, and let's wait and see what Daboll can do with them, or you think they need to look for their next quarterback?
No, I think I'd agree. Let's wait and see what he can do with him. I don't know that he is going to be the guy, but I think he has potential. And like I said, with a new coaching staff, they should make the offense, fit him and give him every opportunity. And again, ideally they should still have a great running game there. And I think the new coaching staff, I definitely wouldn't think they'd take quarterback with either one of those picks.
Yeah, they went offensive line with Andrew Thomas 2 years ago. He's not really been that great. They got Max Garcia, who they got John Feliciano, who they've got Mark Glowinski, they got Matt Pert as their offensive lineman. They definitely need offensive linemen. I would not be surprised if at 5-7 they take 2 offensive linemen and stack that offensive line up. They need wide receivers, Dad. Last year they drafted Kadarius Toney, and I didn't look up to see which receivers went after him, but I know there was a bunch of them that were a lot better than Kadarius Toney. I was very surprised with that pick. Kenny Galladay did really nothing last year, and maybe some of that has to do with the quarterback or the system or whatever from there. But they need help. They need it in several positions as well. So I think at number 5, they could be primed for a cornerback there, the best cornerback off the board. But I think at 5 and 7, if they don't make a move, that 7's a great spot to trade out of for those that are high on a quarterback. I think that's where you start getting into that quarterback range because you're coming up on teams that are possibly going to draft a quarterback. So you could start seeing some movement there at 5 or 7 because Carolina's number 6. They could draft a quarterback. And then your teams at 8 and 9, I believe, are both possible quarterback landing spots with Atlanta and Seattle. So the Giants might be in the prime situation to trade down, let a little quarterback action go ahead of them, and still get some really solid players as well as pick up some draft picks. What do you think about that?
Yes, I definitely think, I'd be shocked if they don't trade down out of one of those. And again, they may not have to trade down very far. Let's say Carolina has, they're going to take a quarterback and they have a certain one that they want. Are they not interested in trading up a pick so somebody doesn't trade up ahead of them? Right. That very easily could happen. And of course, if the Giants were just trading spots there, they could still get the guys they want in the next 2 picks. So I would be surprised if the Giants don't trade down. Again, they may not trade down very far, may not need to trade down very far. But if they stayed within these first 12 picks or so, it probably would work because again, there are a lot of good offensive linemen. There are a couple that are supposed to be elite, but there are several, both tackles and inside guys that they could still probably easily help themselves on the offensive line.
Yeah, and honestly, even these tackles are graded out to be good interior linemen as well. Speaking of Evan Neal and Iquanu are the 2 main ones. Charles Cross from Mississippi State is supposed to be pretty solid as well. So there's definitely some options up high here for the Giants to go with. Pick number 6 is Carolina. Matt Rule's still there. Ben McAdoo comes in as the offense coordinator. Phil Snow retained as the defensive coordinator. Chris Tabor at special teams. They currently have Christian McCaffrey, DJ Moore wide receiver, Brian Burns, and Derek Brown on the line, Shaq Thompson at linebacker, CJ Henderson and J.C. Horn at cornerback, Xavier Woods at safety. They need a quarterback. I don't know. In my opinion, 6 is too high. They need offensive line help. They need tight ends as well and linebacker help too. So I think when you get to this spot, I think Carolina, they might be bluffing a little bit with the quarterback situation, hoping again that people will move up. And I think at the end of the day, I think the best move is going to be offensive line here, but it also could be cornerback because you're going to have a really good cornerback on the board as well. If they go quarterback, honestly, I'll be very, very surprised. But if they do, you have to think it would be Willis out of Liberty. But again, there's a lot of ties, Pickett to Matt Rule. So I don't know. 6 is too high for a quarterback, isn't it?
Yes, I don't think any of the quarterbacks, are going to be the one that's going to necessarily be the answer this year. And I don't know that Matt Rule is going to have time. I mean, he's going to have to do better or he won't be the coach there next year. So,
yes. So what about guys like Baker Mayfield or Jimmy Garoppolo?
Yeah, that would be a much better answer. I think definitely probably Garoppolo. But again, Baker Mayfield may be good too. And again, we may see something happen on that before the draft starts. Maybe a few days before, maybe the day of. But you would think they would be in the market for one of those guys.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, if you need a quarterback right now and you're trying to keep your job, you're not drafting a quarterback, not as a coach. You're wanting somebody with experience. And whether that be a Jimmy Garoppolo or a Baker Mayfield, first of all, will sell tickets. Secondly, he was injured. And I really think you get him you put him in a Matt Rule system, I think he succeeds. So I think that's a real possibility. We'll see how all that shakes out, though, for sure. Carolina with just the one pick here in the first round. They could be looking to trade down to add some picks to their options as well. Number 7 is the Giants again. Number 8 is Atlanta. They got Arthur Smith, his second year as head coach, Dave Ragone, Dean Pease, and Marquise Williams round out the staff. Key players, Kyle Pitts, Cordero Patterson, Grady Jarrett on the D-line, A.J. Terrell, and Casey Hayward at cornerback. And, of course, they bring in quarterback Marcus Mariota, which some would say is taking out the option of them drafting a quarterback, even though they got rid of Matt Ryan. Mariota's not the long-term play, but again, I'm not sure there's a quarterback even at 8 that makes sense for Atlanta to kind of go for if they want to succeed next year. And Arthur Smith, he's not necessarily the one pulling the strings for the draft, but you got to think he wants to make the team better this year, which tends to lean towards wide receiver because they don't have any. They need offensive line, D-line, linebacker, safety, quarterback, but wide receiver is a spot where they have been absolutely crippled at. And I think that's probably the direction they go here at 8 as opposed to quarterback. But your thoughts on Atlanta?
Well, I think the fact, again, they have 2 picks in the second round. So I think in many ways at this pick, number 8, they can take the best player available. As long as, because they can use quite a few of them. And then I think they have 2 picks in the second round. They can do a little more at filling need. And the best player available might be one of those guys, may be a wide receiver. It might be, someone that fits there, whether it be the edge rusher or whatever it might be. So I would think they're in a spot at 8 where they can take the best available, be sure they get a good player, and then we're having 2 picks in the second round and 2 picks in the third round. They can work on getting some of the help they need.
Yeah, they've had success with their first-round receivers, right? Julio Jones was worked out for them. Calvin Ridley worked out for him until he didn't. Right now they got Auden Tate, Demir Bird, Olamide. I don't know. I've never even heard of this guy. Zacchaeus. They need a wide receiver bad, like badly. So I'd be surprised if they pass on wide receiver. Yes, they need offensive line help as well. I don't know. And Cordero Patterson, where did he come from, right? In college, he was really, really solid, really good. Minnesota, he never really did much there. He moved. What did he do? Did he go to Chicago? I forget where else he's been now before he finally ended up in Atlanta, where they moved him directly to running back, said, you play running back, and it worked. And it worked pretty well for him.
Mm-hmm. Yes, yeah, it did, and he's a guy that has flexibility that, they put him at running back. They can do a lot with him. So, but, a lot like the Deebo Samuel type thing, except he's not Deebo Samuel.
He's not, but he plays more than Deebo Samuel, so that makes him valuable nonetheless. All right, let's see here. Where are we at? Pick number 9 is Seattle. They get this pick from Denver. They didn't have a first-round pick, but they get one from Denver in the trade for Russell Westbrook. Pete Carroll's still there. Shane Waldron, the OC. Clint Hurt, the DC. And Larry Izzo, the special teamer. They're 2 really good receivers, DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett. Tight end Noah Fant that they get from Denver also. Running back Chris Carson. DN Shelby Harris. They got really good safeties, Jamal Adams and Quandre Diggs, although Adams hasn't played up to his paycheck just yet either. They need a quarterback. They need an offensive line. They need defensive line. They need linebacker. They need cornerback. I think this is a good spot for cornerback or even a more of an edge guy. There's plenty of edge guys in this draft as well. But I think number 9 is where you really get interesting with quarterback because I think Willis fits well with what they did with Russell Westbrook. Makes sense for him to come in here as well. And I think this is your first really legit quarterback spot from the way the draft currently sits. I think Seattle's a real potential here to take quarterback at number 9.
That they could, again, you never know, what they're saying is, they're going to give Locke a chance this year. From there, we don't think he's a long-term answer. I think when you look at their GM, and you look at his background, he comes from the Ron Wolf tree, and that's always been stay with your board and the best player available. So it'll be interesting to see. But again, he's under pressure to get things, straightened back around in Seattle.
Yeah, he is. And you said Drew Lock's not a long-term answer. I don't think Drew Lock's a short-term answer. I don't have any confidence in Drew Lock winning games. And again, if the deal is you want a quarterback next year, then maybe Drew Lock is your quarterback this year, and you don't draft a guy. But that being said, again, I think Willis is a good fit here. They got Drew Lock, they got Geno Smith, and they got Jacob Eason are their three quarterbacks as it currently sits. They got decent running backs with Carson, Rashad Penny, even DJ Dallas there a little bit as well. Defensively, they haven't been great at defense now for a while. They're in a really tough division as well. So you're looking about just trying to stay with the Rams and with the 49ers and with the Cardinals. Defensive back help is important. So you get Trent McDuffie, cornerback out of Washington. Washington has produced some really good cornerbacks as of late. He's an option. Offensive line help, of course, and then edge rushers. There's so many edge rushers out there right now. There should be a good one available there for Seattle at number 9. Number 10 is the Jets. Number 11, the Washington Commanders. An interesting team. Ron Rivera, the coach, Scott Turner, Jack Del Rio, Nate Kazgor are the position coaches, coordinators, excuse me. Carson Wentz comes over at quarterback, Antonio Gibson running back, McLaurin at wide receiver. They got Montez Sweat and Chase Young at the edges. Jamin Davis they drafted last year, middle linebacker. William Jackson, Kendall Fuller at cornerback. Dad, they need quarterback long-term. They need offensive line help, linebackers. I think they need safety, and I think this is where we might see Kyle Hamilton come off the board, the safety from Notre Dame. Seems like a solid fit here, if not one of the linebackers as well. But your thoughts on Washington and their setup for this draft?
It seems to me like this would be the great spot for a wide receiver, the second one or two, because they're going to need people there and need weapons for Wentz. But you're right. I mean, I think they could use any of those as far as defense, especially a stellar defensive player. But I'd be a little surprised maybe if they're not looking at wide receiver.
Maybe. I think they like the receiving core. I mean, you've got McLaurin, Curtis Samuel, and Cam Sims. They drafted a guy in the 4th round last year that hasn't made it, Gandy Golden. But, I think if the right quarterback falls here, I think if Willis is there, last year they drafted a kid from Liberty, so why not make it 2 years in a row? Maybe they go long-term. But, again, if they're looking to win this year, you're going to look at somebody who can actually help you this year. Offensive line is a need. They've got Leno at left tackle, Cosme at right tackle. They lost Brandon Scherf in free agency. So they've got some weaknesses and some holes there. Again, defensively, they got good talent over there. Again, if you get the top safety off the board at number 11, I don't think that's a bad pick. Wide receiver, if you love one of them, because there are going to be some good ones. So if you love one of them, go out and get them there as well. Number 12, and our last one we're covering today is the Minnesota Vikings. Kevin O'Connell comes over as the head coach. Wes Phillips is the OC. Ed Donatel, the DC. Matt Daniels, special teams. They got Kirk Cousin, Dalvin Cook, Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen, Dalvin Tomlinson on the line, Danielle Hunter on the edge, Harrison Smith at safety, Patrick Patterson, cornerback, Jordan Hicks, Zadarius Smith there as well. They need offensive line help. They need a tight end. They need some defensive line help, safety, and cornerback as well. Again, I think when you're looking at these picks, you're looking at what's in the division as well. Cornerback help would be big if one of the top 3 guys is there. But again, offensive line, anything on the defense, I think is good for Minnesota. Your thoughts?
Yes, well, I mean, we all know that the biggest need Minnesota has is a quarterback, but they don't think so. So they're not gonna worry about that. I think when you look at it, they could either go with a cornerback who could be there, but again, they need interior line, offensive line. And I think you're going to have the number one center, and which he could play guard, and the one number, probably the top two guards will still be there when they get to this spot. And I wouldn't think they would want to pass up that opportunity if those guys were there.
Are you talking about the kid from Iowa?
Yes.
Okay. I wasn't sure.
Yeah. He would be the center, and I've heard he could easily move to guard from there. But you got the guard, and everything I've read looks like really good kid from Boston College that has flexibility on the offensive line and can play interior there. And of course, you got the kid from A&M, who's a highly ranked guard too. And could it be some of the other guys move around?
Yeah, I think you're definitely looking defense or offensive line. But I think Minnesota, again, is a prime spot to move down. They don't have any glaring weaknesses. I don't hate Kirk Cousins. I think he's better than at least half the league, if not more than that. And what he has with weapons-wise, they've got what they need, generally speaking, on offense, with the exception of offensive line and tight end. But I don't think you're taking a tight end there either. I think Minnesota moves down at the end of the day. I don't think they have, like I said, a glaring need. So if they can move down anywhere from 4 to 5 spots, again, you're looking in that now. You're starting to get in that quarterback range where guys are trying to maneuver and things like that. You also got other players who are falling down the board, possibly as well. You got cornerbacks like Derek Stingley Jr., who maybe is falling here to number 12. That would be an interesting pickup there to partner with Patrick Peterson to LSU standouts there as well. So I don't know. I'm interested to see where they go when it comes to our mock draft in a couple weeks. We'll see which way we go with that as well. So that's the first 10 teams that are drafting. Our next episode on Monday, we'll look at the next 10 teams drafting, starting off with the Ravens, the Eagles, and the Saints is where we'll start off with there as well. All right, let's talk about a few other things. Let's continue with the NFL. The Packers signed Sammy Watkins. Dad, we had a conversation on the phone the other day. I didn't think there's any way they're going to trade for or sign a number 1 receiver, but said a number 2 guy makes sense. Sammy Watkins is that. He gives some speed and some talent there as well. Are you happy with Sammy Watkins to Green Bay?
Yes, I think that was a good move. Again, they got him at a good price. It's not going to hurt him there. And, he has been very good. And we will see. I think Aaron Rodgers can make a lot of receivers better. And Watkins, again, he's not replacing Devontae Adams, no. But he may be a real weapon. Could be very positive. It could really energize his career.
Me and you have both been on record saying we like Derek Carr. He gets the extension. He's there. The AFC West, Dad, has quarterbacks locked up for at least the next 3 years. So you're looking at Russell Wilson, Patrick Mahomes, Derek Carr, and Herbert, all there in the same conference for the next several years. Do you think Vegas did the right thing by locking up Derek Carr?
Yes, I think so. Again, I like him too, and I think he has a lot of weapons. But like you said, he's in a tough division. I mean, he got a lot of money, and he may be the 4th best quarterback in that division. But he does play well. And again, I'm not as confident in the coaching staff there as you are, but it may be a great fit for him. But he's a definite leader. He took a team that could have fallen apart this year, and I think he was a guy that kept them in it.
Yeah, I think it's a great move. I think that overall they're going to be well set on offense. I think McDaniels will do better this time around. And at the end of the day, I think overall it works out really well for them. But again, you're competing against Denver, who's gotten better. You're competing against the Chargers, who should get better. And you compete against the Chiefs, who have one of the best quarterbacks in the league. So we'll see about that. The XFL made news this week, announcing their head coaching hires of Reggie Barlow, Anthony Beck, Terrell Buckley, Jim Haslett, Wade Phillips, Bob Stoops, Hines Ward, and Rod Woodson for a league that's going to compete against another league in the USFL. They made a pretty good splash with their coaching hires this week, don't you think?
Yes, they did. They brought in some big names, some good names, and it's going to be interesting to see how these two spring leagues do. Being there's two of them that next year will be competing. Of course, we'll have to see how well the USFL does this year.
Yeah, and it's starting up this weekend, so we'll get to
Yep.
start seeing it here right away for sure. Let's talk about some baseball stuff before we head out today. We need to start with Clayton Kershaw. Clayton Kershaw pitching a no-no and gets yanked. They decide not to do it. Kershaw says all the right things afterwards. He hadn't pitched more than 60-some pitches in a session up to that point and all this kind of stuff. I mean, we're at the beginning of the season, an opportunity for history, and they yank him. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I don't know. I've thought about it a lot today because I heard a lot of talk about it. I think, he said all the right things. If that's really how he felt, then yes, it was, the Dodgers may have made the right move as far as having him long term. When you look at what he's accomplished in his career, he's really accomplished a lot. And the one thing he doesn't have is a perfect game. So should have he got the opportunity to go a little further with that? I don't know. Would that really hurt? Down the line later on in the season. Again, we don't know if it even would have pitched 2 more innings. The perfect game may not have continued, but it seems like it would have made sense for him to get the opportunity. But again, if he was definitely in on it and said, no, this is not going to be the best for me, then, they may have made the right decision. Again, I think, the Dodgers need to make the decision. He needed to make the decision. It was interesting today. I heard a big name national guy on the radio who's always outspoken and I don't agree with very often, and I didn't on this, but he made a big point about, hey, the fans. A player like Kershaw owes nothing to the fans. The idea that the fans want to see a perfect game, that has nothing to do with it there. And I thought, I thought you're in a sports entertainment business, and I thought professional athletes were. So to say it has nothing to do with it, I think that was totally wrong from there. But again, if Kershaw's health was really an issue, again, it would have been a great thing, for him to get a perfect game. I heard today that there's only been one other time that's happened when someone had a perfect game through 7 innings and got pulled. And strangely enough, that guy was pulled by the same manager.
There you go. So history repeats itself.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, again, Kershaw's had health issues. I get it. I find it surprising. I mean, 7th inning, he didn't have a ton of pitches on him. Send him out for the 8th and see what happens, right? I mean, he might give it up with this first batter, and then you could pull him then. I mean, yeah. I don't know. That's a tough one. That's a tough one for sure. Speaking of tough ones, your neck of the woods in South Ohio, comments made by the Reds president when pressured to have his dad sell the team. He says, well, where are you going to go? Let's start there. I mean, sell the team to who? I mean, that's the other thing. I mean, you want to have this debate? If you want to look at what would you have this team do to have it be more profitable, make more money, compete more in this current economic system that this game exists, it would be to pick it up and move it somewhere else. And then he says, be careful what you ask for. I think we're doing the best we can do with the resources we have. These Reds fans, it's been a rough couple months for the Reds fans. And I've been very negative on the Reds for a little while now, but they trade away most of their good players. And now they're being told, be careful what you ask for, because maybe my family, instead of selling the team, will pick it up and move it. Of course, he's since come out and apologized. But I mean, how sad it is for the Reds fans, right?
Yeah, it really is. It's a tough situation here. And again, I mean, he did come back and apologize, but I think be careful what you ask for. You need to be careful about what you say. It's quite the fan base here. They've been very supportive. If the fans predominantly turn on the ownership here, it'll just get uglier and it won't leave I do not think the Cincinnati Reds are moving anywhere else. I heard Johnny Bench today. I mean, there are people that are not going to let that happen. And so that was a very unwise statement. I mean, I know they were getting a lot of pressure, but I'm not sure they did the right thing. I'm not sure, okay, if you're going to blow it up, then, do they have a plan? I think that was part of the big question asked. What's their plan then? How are they going to rebuild this? We've seen some other teams blow it up, but all of a sudden this year, in our preview, we said, well, maybe Kansas City's heading in the right direction now. Maybe Detroit's making some improvements now. Okay, what's going to be Cincinnati's plan there? Do they have the farm system? Do they, are they committed? I think that's as much what the fans want to see as anything else, because I think the whole thing blowing it up like they did really took everybody by surprise.
I agree. All right. Anything else you want to cover before we go?
No, I don't think so. Like I said, there's going to be a lot on the next few shows that we can do. And of course, we're just a couple of weeks away from the draft, and that'll surely be exciting.
Well, me and Dad really enjoyed talking sports and sharing that with you. This weekend is a special weekend. It's Easter weekend. And Dad and I are both believers, Christians. And we celebrate Easter differently than some. I don't mind candy and chocolates and stuff like that, but our focus is on the resurrection of Jesus Christ. And just want to let you all know that God loves you so much that he sent his son, Jesus, to die on the cross for you. And the wonderful thing about God is that he's alive. Jesus died on the cross, but 3 days later he rose again. And that's what we celebrate Easter for. And just want to let everyone know that as much as we love to talk sports, we sure like talking about God as well. And so if you're out there and you're listening and you've had questions or you want some answers, I'll be happy to do our best to help you out. You can contact us through social media on Twitter or Instagram at Sports Stove, or you can always email the show, thesportsstove@gmail.com. I'll be happy to share with you how you can know for sure that you will go to heaven one day. On that note, I've got an interview lined up with Josh Lindblom, pitcher, and we're going to talk about Christianity and faith within sports. And that interview will come out sometime. I'm not sure if it's going to come out next week or not. We're gonna record it next week, but we'll have that out for you soon as well. And really looking forward to that also. All right. With that being said, we sure appreciate you tuning in to today's episode of the Sports Stove Podcast. Catch us every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, wherever you get your podcasts, or on Belly Up TV. We're on at 7 a.m. and 2 p.m. on Belly Up TV on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays as well. Thank you so much for tuning in to this edition of the Sports Stove Podcast. And until next time, we'll